Now, the next thing we would like to bring up, how to form a relationship more clearly and more consciously with what many of you have for a long time called your higher self. This mysterious higher self. Where is it? Don't know. Is he up there? Is she over there? Don't know. How high? This high? This high? Don't know. What is the higher self? Thank you. Let's address this. So you have some definitions to work with, which again are nothing but what? Permission slips. That's all we're delivering here. Everything we say, everything we deliver to you is nothing but another form of permission slip. Take which one works for you. The ones that don't work for you, let them be. Now, let's go into a little bit more detail. Higher self. All right. Most of you are familiar with the idea that you have a physical consciousness, a personality as a physical being that you relate to as yourself, so to speak. But then there is this mysterious idea of the higher self. Simply put, most of you understand, or at least intuit, that the so-called higher self, well, is relatively non-physical. Even more simply put, you could say that there is a vibrational frequency just above physical reality, just beyond physical reality, in which resides what you might refer to as a template for physical reality, or upon which you construct your physical experience. It is in that template level, just beyond the physical threshold, that the higher self exists. Now, please do not confuse the idea of higher self with oversoul or spirit or what have you. Higher self is a specific idea that is like a version of the person you are in physical reality, but a version that has a broader perspective, a broader point of view. It's like having a twin standing on a mountaintop while one is also standing in the valley. And they can communicate with each other. And the higher self can say, I see you walking down the road, and I see that there is, well, a little bit of a ditch up ahead, so if you walk this way and walk that way, you'll avoid it. And the one in the valley going, oh, thank you very much. This is, very simply put, the relationship between the two. It is you with a higher perspective, a broader perspective, a bigger picture, without the complications that can arise from the personality construct's belief system. So the higher self is like a guiding principle, a governing principle, so to speak, that is a part of your complex as a person, but is the non-physical component that acts as the conduit to even higher versions of your soul, of your being, of your spirit, but also acts as the intermediary between those higher levels and the physical personality construct, and can distill information in a way that your personality can understand. So the higher self functions like a translator. However, because of some of the belief systems that exist within the personality structure on your planet, there has been confusion as to exactly how to form a clear communication line to the higher self. So let's make something very, very clear. This may sound a little bit surprising. There are 3 levels here in this idea. It might surprise you to know, as personality constructs, as physical minds, you do not conceive of any ideas. What do I mean? The personality does not conceive of concepts. It perceives concepts. It does not conceive them. Here are the three levels. The higher self conceives. The physical brain receives. The personality mind perceives. That's all it does. Any idea, any inspiration, any imagination you have ever had doesn't come from the physical mind portion of you. It comes from the higher self portion of you. Through the receiver, the brain, and is translated by the brain into a vibration that the physical mind then perceives as a reflected reality. One more time, because this is crucial to understand. You don't conceive of any ideas as a physical mind. That's not what the physical mind is designed to do. It cannot create ideas. It can only perceive the result of an idea from the higher self. Now, this may sound at first somewhat limiting, but in fact, it's very, very freeing. Because you can all stop thinking. You can all stop thinking you're in charge. You can all stop thinking you have to think of everything. You can all stop thinking that you're the one guiding the ship. You're not. You are just looking at the road. You're just experiencing the path that you, the whole you, is creating. But the reason you get into trouble, the reason you feel stuck as a physical mind, is because you've been taught to believe that the physical mind is the one coming up with all this stuff. And it's not. Now, here's also what happens. And again, this is an important distinction. Physical mind cannot perceive how something happens. It can only perceive how something happened. One more time. It's a very important distinction, and I'll explain. Physical mind does not have the capacity to perceive how something happens. It can only perceive how something happened. But because the physical mind thinks it's coming up with these things, and all you do is repeat the cycle and wonder why you're not getting anywhere. You have to allow the connection to your own higher self to be the one that will allow you to experience the reality that comes from the higher self, because the higher self is the only part of you that actually knows how things happen, because it's on the mountaintop. It has the broader perspective. It can see what's coming. It can orchestrate. You're in the valley as a physical being. From the physical perspective, your view is somewhat limited. But the idea is it doesn't matter. As we will discuss and point out, and as many of you have heard, all you really need to do, to use the analogy they use of driving your car, is see the road just a few hundred feet ahead. You don't have to see the road all the way from your beginning to your destination. That's the higher self's point of view. So you don't have to know exactly how you're going to get there. All you need to know as the physical side of the personality mind is where you're at right now. The higher self will tell you, keep going. Turn left. Turn right. You're going to get there quicker this way. You're going to get there quicker that way. You need to stop for now. You need to take a rest. You need to take a bathroom break. Then get back in your car and keep going. That comes from the higher self portion of the total being that you are as a person, as a persona. But the physical mind aspect of the personality does not have the capacity to understand how things happen. So, stop trying to figure it out. Because you never will as a physical person. Only as a higher self expression when you are in communication and allowing that communication to occur, will you then be able to take advantage of knowing how it's going to happen, but the physical mind will not know how it's going to happen. This is using the invisible to your advantage. It's really about knowing and understanding the nature of your actual existence, understanding the structure of the relationship, understanding how it is you have arranged yourself as a consciousness, and then simply using it in the same way that you use a telephone, a light switch, or any other device. But in order to really do that as fully as you possibly can, you must drop the assertion and the assumption that the physical mind needs to know how everything works. Because it never, ever will. It's not designed to. And this allows you to lighten up your load, stop carrying so much baggage, stop trying to do your higher self's job, and just do your own. That's why so many of you are so tired when you are trying to do certain things in a certain way. It's because you're trying to do a job you weren't designed to do. That's exhausting. Stop. Your higher self already has the job, and it's working for you perfectly. Let the higher mind come through you and relate to it, but don't try to do the higher mind's job for it. So again, higher self conceives. Physical brain receives. Physical mind perceives.
I'd like to welcome to the show Dariel Anka. How you doing, Darriel?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic, my friend. It has been a long time since we've seen each other, though we stay in contact here and there. And I really didn't know about the other side of your world. I only knew you as the filmmaker. And then I found out about Bashar, and I was completely floored by what you do and how you do it.
Well, yeah, I've been doing this now for going on 39 years, and I just can only treat it that way, as something that simply happened for me. There's nothing magical about me, except that I guess, this occurred, and I just went with it.
And you came from the world of visual effects and in the film industry. So can you talk a little bit about how you started, where you come from, and then how you got onto this path?
Well, in 83, as I was exploring a lot of different metaphysical things, because in 1973, I had actually had 2 broad daylight UFO sightings here over LA. And that just blew me away to the point where I'm going, okay, the world isn't what we were told. There's something else going on here. And I started doing all sorts of research, and especially back then, when you do research into spiritual and metaphysical things and UFOs, every book that existed on all of that was all on 1 or 2 shelves in the bookstore. So I just kind of went down the line, and I learned about things like channeling from the Seth material, Jane Roberts. And 10 years after the sighting, I was introduced by someone to a channel who was conducting seminars. And I thought, okay, this is interesting. I went and just wanted to hear what a live channel was like. And the information I thought was really kind of interesting and helpful. But at one point, the channel offered to teach channeling in a class. And I thought, well, I didn't think you could learn this. I thought it was just something that sort of happened to you out of the blue. So I went into the class not thinking I was going to be a channel. I just wanted to do more research and figure out what this was all about. But about halfway through the class, the entity that was coming through was conducting a guided meditation, and something happened where it just sort of opened up in my head, like a memory just unfolded, like somebody just shoved a DVD in my head. And all all of a sudden understood that the UFO I had seen had been shown on purpose to me. So I would start learning about these things. I understood who Bashar was as an extraterrestrial entity, and that I had made an agreement somewhere along the line, maybe even before this life, to do this with him. And all this was kind of unfolding in my head in a split second. And the second this was happening, and I hadn't said anything, I was still in the meditation, the entity coming through the channel stopped talking to the class and turned to me and said, "There's an entity here for you right now if you're ready to begin." And at the same time, I opened my eyes and I looked behind me. One of the classmates had picked up on the image of Bashar I saw in my head, and she was actually sketching it on a piece of paper. And so I knew immediately that there was two outside validations that this wasn't just my imagination. Something real was happening here. So I kind of went with it. I kept practicing, and I got good enough that the teacher asked me to co-channel the next class with him. And eventually a woman came along who was looking for subjects to do a doctoral thesis paper on the connection between psychology and channeling, and I became one of her subjects. She would invite me to her house, her friends would come over, I would channel for them. And the first week would be like 5 people, and the second week would be 10, and the third week would be 20, and word of mouth kept spreading. People would take the recordings and share them with people, and eventually I started getting asked to do this in different houses and more than 3 times a week. We had to start renting auditoriums. Eventually people in other countries heard about it and started inviting me to their countries to channel, and it just kind of took off. And here I am 39 years later doing the same thing.
What's really interesting is that, you started this process in the late 70s.
Well, the channeling started in the 80s.
In the 80s. Okay. So in the 80s, where we are today in regards to metaphysics and spirituality and the concepts of meditation and yoga and all these kind of things, they weren't in mainstream consciousness at all in the 80s.
Oh yeah, no, things like channeling and psychic functioning and stuff like that, you were considered a crackpot. You were just out of your mind, or you were deluded, or something along that line. And it's been gratifying to see that even if people don't have a complete grasp of it now, at least there's some consideration for it. So it's become part of the language, and I think a little less of a taboo.
For people listening who don't understand what a channel is, can you just give a basic definition?
Sure. Channeling is just being in an altered state that's called gamma in the brain. This is between 40 and 100 cycles per second, and everyone channels from time to time. Everyone's in that state. It's what we call being in the zone. When you are doing something that you love to do, you're completely consumed by it. You have no sense of the passage of time. You think you've been doing something for 15 minutes. You look up, it's been 2 hours. That's the channeling state. So it's a natural altered state that we all do. But what we've discovered, and this is one of the reasons why we made the documentary that we made, First Contact, is we wanted to totally demystify what the concept of channeling was all about. So, in the documentary, I even had my head wired to an EEG machine to see what was going on in the brainwaves and the difference between my normal state and the channeling state. And we found there are some profound differences.
So if the parts of my brain that process my personality when I'm awake shut off, who's talking?
In the beginning of the channeling, the channel was capable of holding on to, shall we say, or bringing through the idea of about 1.5 to 2% of our energy. In the ensuing years following the initiation of contact with the channel, it was thus then capable in the channel's body of expressing our energy up to about 3%. On average now, we are expressing about 5% of our total energy.
So we're looking at a picture of Daryl's baseline EEG. And what I've done is to record Daryl's baseline when he is not channeling and compare that to his EEG when he is channeling. Now here is a picture of Daryl's raw EEG, baseline again, in which we see a very rounded and rhythmic dominant frequency, we call it, in the posterior cortex, or the back of the head. And this is a good finding, it's a positive finding, because it tells us that Daryl's nervous system is stable and also that he has what we call good thalamocortical functioning. So here we have a picture of what disconnects when Daryl begins to channel. And you can see the areas in blue that are not used when he is channeling. And it appears that he disconnects from his personal sense of self. He disconnects from the experience of pain. Now, what increases when he begins to channel is, first of all, his processing speed. And processing speed is a very interesting phenomenon because what happens is it develops early in childhood. And by about the age of 5 or 6, and certainly 9 or 10 maximum, we reach a set point. And this set point doesn't usually change during the lifetime. And in Daryl's case, it actually went up when he began to channel. And it increased when he listened. The actual frequency of the processing speed was tuned to an exact frequency all over the brain.
You have to realize that the only reason the set point changes is because the connection with us and our vibration as the channel takes on a new frequency means that the channel is a different person with a different set point. Remember, all change is actually a shift to a different reality, a different version of yourself. You may think it's the same person, but it's not. Literally, it's not. Therefore, the change in set point actually represents a measurable aspect of the fact that a person has become a different person in a different reality and is now operating on a different frequency.
To summarize sort of what I found here in Daryl's brain in comparison with the channeling state, he starts from a very stable resting state. And then he experiences changes that statistically less than 1% of the population would experience in the same way. He increases his processing speed. He tunes it exquisitely to one frequency all over the brain. And then he's able to create a resonant holding environment for the peak performance or the channeling to happen. He pumps energy into the right frontal cortex and the right auditory cortex so that he can empathize and hear very, very clearly. And because of the gamma frequencies in the anterior cingulate, he can shift gears. He'll be able to shift gears and navigate cognition, thoughts, and emotions very, very flexibly. And he'll be able to interpret from a higher perspective, from a more evolved place in his mind, much like from the highest mountaintop.
When anyone gets into that state, no matter what they choose to do with it, different things are happening. There's a higher state of connectivity, of association, of information synthesis and processing. There's altered perceptions of how things are interconnected with one another. And so you can bring through all sorts of creative acts, creative information. I mean, you know, when a painter is lost in a painting, when a singer is lost in the song, they're channeling. When an actor becomes the role, they're channeling. So it's a profoundly accelerated and upgraded state of being in which you can create and bring through information on a much higher level, kind of like standing on a mountaintop and seeing the big picture instead of being down in the valley and limited. So I just happen to, you know, steer in the direction of connecting to what presents itself as an extraterrestrial entity who operates on that level consistently in terms of their frequency, their vibration from a higher plane of existence. Because that's also what happens when you channel, or when you're in that state of doing what you love to do, is your frequency, your energy goes up. As I said, the brainwave goes much higher. And it connects you to different things that are then possible to connect to from that level. So no one has to believe that Bashar is real. It might be another aspect of my own consciousness or personality, but I have to let it present itself the way that it does. But really the point I always make to people is it's not about whether you believe that Bashar is real. The information that he shares with us is valid and real. And you can actually test what he shares with us as formulas and messages and information in your life and actually get the result he's saying you will get. So it's kind of like you can prove the information is real by getting an effect in your life. Whether you believe he's real or not is not the point.
Now, can you explain to people who is Bashar as far as the message that he's trying to get? Not as much about who he is. It's almost irrelevant who he is. It's the message,
Exactly.
like you said. So what is that message? What is that information that he's trying to come through you?
The primary message is how we create our reality, how we experience physical reality, how we can change our physical reality experiences to be more in alignment with what we prefer, because he's literally teaching us the physics of how we already manifest things in physical reality. And he provides literally a toolkit or a formula to follow that's very basic and very simple, but very effective and makes profound changes in our lives. And one of the most gratifying things I get out of doing the channeling is having people constantly come back to me and said, I applied his formula, I applied his information as precisely as possible, and this profound synchronous change happened in my life, and I've never been happier.
I obviously believe that we're a spiritual being. We are, and most of the planet does believe in some sort of spirit or higher power of some sort. Do you believe that we are a spirit having a dream that we're in a physical body,
Exactly.
as opposed to the opposite way, which most people think?
I believe that exactly. In fact, I've done a lot of research on near-death experiences and what people say about when they come back and all that. And based on that and what Bashar has said, it's like we actually never leave spirit. Spirit is our natural state. Right. But we can dream that we've left. We can take a part of our consciousness in spirit and pretend that we're playing this game called physical reality. We can impose this sort of limited filter on our consciousness to have this experience, but the majority of our consciousness is in spirit and never leaves. That's where we reside. That's who we are. It's what we are. So yeah, I believe that physical reality is an extension of spirit, that it is literally a dream to discover ourselves from a new point of view, from a new perspective, because that's what physical reality, according to Bashar, is all about. It's like you come from a relatively unlimited state in spirit and limit yourself in a particular way to experience a specific journey that without that process doesn't allow you to necessarily grow or change or discover something new from a different angle. And that's how creation expands in his mind.
The concept of good and bad is something that is very specific to our reality, and good and bad. That Shakespeare didn't say the world is our stage and we are just actors on it.
Right. It's also about learning why. What's the point of the play? What's the lesson we're learning in that? What are we overcoming? What are we trying to transform in that? Because, as they say, it's easier to see a candle flame when it's surrounded by darkness. So it's like we need both sides to understand something about ourselves and to explore something new about ourselves. So it's literally like a play of light and dark. And in that play, we discover who we are as unique aspects of, all that is. But Bashar usually focuses on describing those things, not so much as value judgments of good and bad, but as the idea of positive energy and negative energy, in the sense that positive energy is that which connects and expands, and negative energy is that which creates an experience of disconnection and diminishment. And so he's looking at this more as mechanical energetic devices that can actually be used in a number of ways. And even a negative energy can be used for positive reasons, and a positive energy can be used for negative reasons. So it's just like we're really exploring these devices, these mechanisms of light and dark and positive and negative in ways that constantly expand our understanding of who we are as beings, as parts of creation.
There was a movie that came out in '99, which really was the first film that hit the zeitgeist of the world and really made us question reality, which is The Matrix. And that movie just shook the core. I think it was the first time in my lifetime, at least, that the whole world got a taste of like, wait a minute, they questioned something for a second, like, is this a simulation? It is one of those films that really shook the core of humanity in many ways.
Yeah, it got us to really explore ideas about what reality is, which is very important to do. and it is a simulation, but it's our simulation. I think some people sort of got caught up in the idea that, it's somebody doing something to us, or,
Right.
we're lost and caught in this thing, as opposed to taking the responsibility for understanding we're the ones that are projecting this. We're creating the simulation for our own purposes. And we can forget that, and it feels like we can get caught up in somebody else's creation, but it's all coming from us, all of it. And part of the whole lesson is to learn that we're responsible for what we experience. That doesn't mean we're to blame. It just means that we have the power to take the responsibility to alter that or learn from it in ways that are truly beneficial to us, instead of falling into victimhood about it.
Now, do you remember the things that you channel with Bashar, or do you only see it after the fact when someone records you?
Mostly I see it after the fact, but of course at this point, 39 years in, I understand his basic principles enough that I can talk about them myself.
What are some of the greatest lessons that you think that Bashar has brought in through, or you've channeled in through yourself, that you want to kind of put out into the world?
Well, I would say, again, the basic thing is what he calls the formula, which is a very simple 5-step idea. Number one, it's very critical from his point of view to follow your passion, what he calls the vibration of your true core self. Because we have, from his perspective, a physical mind, and we have a non-physical higher mind, the part of us that's still in spirit. And the two work together, theoretically, when we allow it to, as a guiding system. So he's saying the higher mind communicates to the physical mind in an energy language. Our physical bodies and physical minds translate those energy messages from our higher mind into the physical sensation we call passion, or love, or excitement, or curiosity, or attraction. So when we are willing to act on the passion that is presented to us, is what responds to the higher mind and says, I heard you. I hear you telling me that the reason that this excites me is because this is me. This is my path. This is my vibration. Because according to Bashar, while the higher mind speaks in terms of energy messages, the physical mind language is action, not words. We're in a physical reality. You need to take physical actions to allow things to happen. The second thing is to take that action to the best we can, as far as we can, until we can act on it no longer. So it's like you explore every path, every opportunity to do what it is that excites you, what you're passionate about, until you just simply can't find any other way to do it. So the third thing is to act on that. And this is the tough thing for most people. You have to act on your passion to the best you can, with absolutely zero insistence or assumption as to what you think the outcome should be. Because the truth is, we have no clue what the best outcome actually should look like. Sometimes we might guess, but we don't really know. So by dropping the expectation and the insistence on what the outcome should look like, we allow the higher mind and synchronicity to bring us the outcome that actually will work best for what our true purpose in being here is all about. And the next thing is, no matter what happens, even if it's something we technically don't prefer, that's not vibrationally compatible with us, that doesn't feel right to us, we have to stay in a positive state, because we have to know that that happened for a reason, and that there is a way, by staying in a positive state, that we can actually get a benefit from that non-preferred thing happening in our lives. It clarifies your mind, it clarifies your understanding of the path you're on, to see things sometimes in contrast. The fifth thing, the last thing, is you have to work on your beliefs, and you have to let go of all the fear-based ones, all the negative ones that are holding you back from being yourself. You know, I'm afraid I might fail, I won't be good enough, people will think I'm nuts. All these things have to clear out of you so that this mechanism, this formula, can work more efficiently within you.
So for people listening who are stuck in the survival mode mentality, where you're just trying to figure out how to pay the bills, how to survive in a job that you don't like, all this. How do you suggest people break free from this? Obviously, we all have to make a living.
You have to honor your belief system. If you believe that you need to do what you're doing, no matter how much you may not enjoy it, in order to survive, in order to thrive, in order to be supported, Bashar says, honor your belief system, because it doesn't do you any good to jump off a cliff if you don't believe you have a parachute. You'll just go splat. But here's the thing. There must be a way you can set aside some time to act on your passion.
Right.
And to do that often enough until you allow your passion to prove to you it will support you. Because that, again, is part of the tools that happen when you follow the formula.
The Oversoul is that level of your being, of your consciousness, non-physical in nature, that is a collection of a multitude of individual souls and spirits that express themselves as individual physical beings. The analogy is similar to the idea of the hand being the Oversoul that has many extensions, being the fingers, that you call lives, that dip down from the Oversoul non-physical level through the template level reality, crystallizing into the idea of individuated souls and spirit personalities, and thus then further down, densifying, crystallizing into physical personalities, into individual people, and having experiences in the idea you call physical reality. But all the physical reality lives go back to the idea of the Oversoul. And there are, in that sense, thus then connections between many of you to the same Oversoul vibration. Even though an Oversoul may experience a multitude of diversified, individual experiences as physical beings, as physical people, an Oversoul can not only experience the idea of all the lives simultaneously, but can also not only create what you call past, present, and future lives, but also can split itself into multiple concurrent lives. In other words, many of you already understand the concept you call past lives and future lives, but linearly speaking, you consider the idea of each of those lives to have lived and died before the next one begins and ends. But the Oversoul can also split itself into multiple concurrent lives, living simultaneously with you. Many of you may meet some of your concurrent incarnations from the same Oversoul. Some of you may never meet in the life. It depends upon the theme. It depends upon the reason why such concurrent incarnations were created. Some of you may meet your concurrent incarnations and be friends. Some of you may be enemies. It depends on the theme of exploration that the Oversoul is looking for, the experience the Oversoul has created for itself to have through its extensions, through all of you. You have upon your planet at this time approximately 6 billion people as you count in your language. But of all those 6 billion people, they are the extensions of only about 300,000 Oversouls. So the idea is that you are all very intimately intertwined in a variety of ways. Not only, shall we say, laterally through all the web connections, but also through the Oversouls, multidimensionally on many different levels. You are intertwined as well. And of course, being that the idea of different dimensions simply is another way of saying different vibrational frequencies, different levels. There are, of course, Oversouls for Oversouls, and Oversouls of Oversouls of Oversouls, all the way back to what you call all that is, and of course, all the way back
to the One. Now, the One is the undifferentiated Oversoul of all. The One does not know itself. There is no differentiation, no reflection, no self-awareness in the One. The One is just the One. It is just existence itself. But within the One, since it is the One and must by definition contain any possibility whatsoever, thus then one aspect of the One is that which is that moment of self-awareness by which the One thus then in that reflection becomes self-aware and knows itself as all that is. So the One is the primary Oversoul that is undifferentiated and knows not itself, and knows and perceives that it is the Oversoul of all Oversouls. You may call it God, you may call it Goddess, you may call it Creator, you may call it the Infinite, you may call it anything you wish, it doesn't care. Because all names are created within all that is, so all names are of and from all that is, and all names are of it. No name is outside of it. But for the purposes of this transmission, we are referring to it simply as the prime Oversoul. All that is, the prime Oversoul. For again, as we have said, every part contains the whole. And so the part is just a unique expression of the whole. In a sense, you could say that each part, each and every one of you and every one of us, is the whole, placing specific limitations upon itself to only express one aspect of itself, to have a unique adventure, a unique experience. But all the whole is there. And it is through the rest of that wholeness that each and every one of you contain that you are connected to everything and everyone, everywhere, and everywhen. Even though you may not always know it, but are gaining more awareness of it, bit by bit and bit by bit every day in this age of transformation on your planet, know that you are and do contain all the information you need, for you are connected to everything and can access anything that is pertinent and relevant to your particular expression as a unique aspect of all that is. But as all that is diversifies itself, shall we say, and splits itself off through further and further self-aware recognitions, it becomes different layers, different levels. The first of which you technically refer to in your language as the angels. That is the first level of awareness below all that is, where it is aware of itself as discrete, individuated beings besides itself, that do not incarnate in the way that you do. But below that, it diversifies into a multitude of dimensional beings, experiencing all the different levels of diversification and crystallization down into the denser and denser dimensions of experiential reality of consciousness. There are a multitude of dimensions even denser and deeper than your own. You probably can't imagine them. Nor would you probably want to. That are in many ways so alien to what you understand, you would have no comprehension or ability to imagine what their experiences are like. The very nature, the very notion even of living on a planet is alien to many, many beings on different levels and different dimensions of reality. They look upon you also as you do to them, as an alien life form. How can something live on the surface of a ball, floating in an isolated sector of space? It is an alien concept for many beings. So understand that to many, many beings within creation, you are highly exotic. It is what the Oversoul and all the other Oversouls that you are connected to has chosen to experience for itself. It is simply what you are. It is simply that you are that level. We are simply the expression of our level, as you are the expression of your level, of your frequency, of your domain. It is one of the ways that the Oversoul differentiates and reflects and diversifies and crystallizes itself to have certain kinds of experiences. You can look at each and every one of your lives as the Oversoul deciding to go deep sea diving. The idea that it requires certain equipment to experience physical reality in the same way that you require certain equipment to breathe underwater, under the ocean. Being freer in the air, like the Oversoul is free in non-physical reality, it imposes upon itself the mask, the breather, the tank, and goes diving. Deep, deep down into the sea, the deep blue sea of physical reality. There is always a connection to the surface, but the idea to understand is that when you are in the deep blue sea, the deeper you go, it is a little difficult to see that much farther in front of you. But being on the surface and above the surface, the higher mind and the Oversoul together can work to lay out the course, to say, we can see to the horizon and beyond. We will guide you. We will guide you if you will simply follow that light, follow that frequency, follow that sound, follow that knowledge, follow that vibration of being yourself. Then you will not go astray, and whatever you encounter down there in the deep blue sea, you'll be able to learn from it, to absorb it, to apply it into your life in a positive and constructive and creative way. And one day when you thus then rise back to the surface, take off your mask, take off the breather, take off your tanks, and free yourself once again and wake up into spirit, you will have a better understanding and a clearer connection to the idea of the higher mind and the Oversoul that has always been there guiding you like a beacon. But you can also have a stronger sense of that connection now in physical reality, because this is the age of transformation on your planet, on your little ball floating through space. This is an exciting time upon your planet to experience more of yourself, and as you do, to awaken to the different strata within your consciousness that takes you all the way to the vibration of the Oversoul and to the connection of all other Oversouls. You are one family, a family of Oversouls, and we are, in a sense, your cousins. And as you discover more and more and more of yourself, you will also have your own family reunions of consciousness, so that you can, every day in every way, act as the greater you, forming that partnership, that relationship between physical mind and higher mind, so that you can function as a whole person. As you approach your year of 2012 and what we have referred to as the splitting prism, where all the vibrations that you are choosing to be and choosing to incorporate in your lives, begin through that prism, once they pass through it, to begin to diversify into parallel realities that will diverge, 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 and diverge, to the point eventually, a few decades down the track, where you will not be able to cross from one to the other, and each that you have chosen will be the reality that you experience in totality. Allow yourselves to understand that this is also a function of the Oversoul, to have placed within this experience for all of you this splitting prism, so that the diversifications each of you were created to be will become so refined, so aligned with a particular frequency, that it will be the essence of that reality that individual personality was designed to experience. And as you diverge from that splitting prism and allow your reality to become more and more crystallized along a particular coherent laser-like frequency line, you will see all other things fall away that are not of that vibration, and they will be incapable of crossing those lines in the future, so that each will become its own divergent parallel reality Earth, and each will shift to the Earth that is appropriate for the vibrational frequency you have chosen to make your own through your beliefs and your definitions. This was planted within the Oversouls as a timing device for each and every one of you to feel the rush and the urge to yourself, to be pulled magnetically to your truth, to your true natural self, and to explode through that prism into the parallel reality that truly represents the purest reflection of the aspect of all that is, that each and every one of you